right, how are we going to form the imperative of the Hiphil? What do you think? What do you think we're going to do to form the imperative? If you had to take a wild guess, where would you go to start to form the imperatives? You'd go to the imperfect forms, right? The second person imperfect forms. Okay? And what should you do just by gut instinct now? Lop off the prefix. Lop off the prefix. Okay? Which is, in fact, what you are doing, except for the fact that the hay of the Hiphil now returns. And this is what I was trying to prepare for before when I said even in the imperfect forms there is a hay. It's just that when you add the imperfect prefix, now in the second person with a tau, that hay is gone. However, in the imperative, if this were the imperfect form with both the hay of the Hiphil and the prefix of the imperfect, when we lop off the prefix of the imperfect, we would retain the hay of the Hiphil. So in the imperative, that hay is there. I almost said comes back, right? Which may be accurate. Anyway, the vowel, however, is going to be the vowel of the imperfect. Okay? Do you see the potential problem here now that we have a hay back? What's the difference between the hay that has the I vowel, hic, and the hay that has the A vowel, hock? Well, the first syllable looks a lot the same. You got a hay prefix, but this I vowel is the I vowel of the perfect tense. This A vowel is the A vowel of the imperfect tense, from which the imperative forms are derived. So in that sense, once again, the imperative is seen as related to the imperfect forms, and the difference between that A vowel and the EI vowel is significant here. Though, as it turns out, the first form of the imperative, which you should now be able to construct with, what are we going to put here to make it imperative? The hay, pathak shwa, right? Hay, pathak shwa. But the first form of the imperative, oddly enough, does not have the infix. Does not have the infix. So it's hock tail, not hock teal. I wish I had a reason for this, and Professor Adams is shaking his head no, saying, don't ask me, I don't know either. Yeah. So I feel better now. However, the minute you get to the other forms of the imperative, you can lop off the prefix, or you could describe it, I suppose, as replacing it with the hay. You're going to get the hock prefix, but now you're also going to get that infix back, just as though we took these second person forms and replaced the tau with a hay. So the imperative forms here will be hock tili, hock tilu, and hock tailna. Hock tailna. Any questions on the imperatives? They're all in the book on page 170, where you have the box showing the full set of imperative forms, which, remember, technically include the imperatives, which are the second person forms, but also the third person forms, which are jussives, and the first person forms, which are cohortative. You'll notice, how do we form, for example, a cohortative in the kal, in the piel, or in the Hiphil? We simply take the first person imperfect, which in this case is actil, and add comma te. Nothing new here. The the plural form, noctil, becomes noctila. All right? Let us, cause to kill, if we were actually translating this. There is one variation to the jussives, however, which, as you know by general principle, what's the rule for forming a jussive? You take the third person imperfect and leave it alone. For all practical purposes, the third person imperfects and the jussives are the same form, except where there's some places where you can sort of contract the form. We saw that in some irregular verbs. And frankly, what happens in the third person imperfect of the Hiphil is that that form does contract, if you will, and the infix long mater letter vowel is gone, so that the jussive is in fact yak-tail, not yak-teal. Well, big deal. Okay? Again, here's a case where the jussive, I mean, on the one hand, you can say this is good news because now you can tell a jussive from an imperfect. The other way of looking at it is it's bad news because it's one more form to confuse you. Okay. But where this is even more significant, though you probably don't even observe it half the time, is remember that it's technically that same shortened form that shows up as your wow consecutive form.